I was recently at a dinner party where the conversation, inevitably turned to the birth rate crisis.
Oh, that old chestnut.
Exactly. And there was this one guest, super articulate, well-dressed guy, works in finance, and he was just so deeply concerned. He was talking with this tragic gravity about the demographic winter, the collapsing workforce.
He had all the data points memorized, I'm guessing?
Oh, completely. Painting this vivid picture of a future with empty schools, a stagnant economy. And he kept saying how we needed to reinvest in the family.
Which on the surface sounds reasonable.
For a moment, yeah. He sounded like a compassionate advocate for social support. But then the tone shifted.
There's always a shift.
Someone at the table suggested that, well, maybe the solution is something like universal childcare or higher wages or rent control, making it actually affordable to be a parent.
Practical things.
And just like that, the compassion just evaporated. The same man who had been mourning the death of the family 5 minutes earlier immediately scoffed, called those ideas entitlements and bad economics. His solution wasn't making life easier. It was that women had become too comfortable, too career-focused, and needed to remember their biological duty.
There it is.
The whole table just went silent. It was this perfect real-time demonstration of a terrifying paradox. He wanted the product, the future workers, but he refused to pay for the production.
That's a powerful way to put it.
And that's what we're diving into today. The core insight here is that this panic over the birth rate crisis isn't just economic. It feels like a reaction from a system that's made life unlivable. And now it's realizing it's run out of human fuel.
Right. And our mission today is really to move past that moral panic and just look at the cold, hard mechanisms.
Yeah.
How does late-stage capitalism directly suppress fertility? And what does the data say about actual solutions?
Exactly.
And that mission is urgent. I mean, the data fully confirms the gravity of that dinner party conversation. We're not talking about small dips here.
No.
Fertility rates across the entire developed world are falling way below the replacement level.
The level you need just to keep the population stable?
Precisely. Which means shrinking workforces, a smaller tax base, and just immense strain on social services, especially for an aging population.
Yeah.
So if we want to get to the bottom of it, we have to quantify those financial pressures that would-be parents always bring up.
Okay, so let's start right there. How expensive is the production, really, for the average family?
It's staggering, especially in the U.S. because the system is so overwhelmingly private. We've got data showing that for families with just one child in full-time care, the cost eats up between 9 and 16% of the median household income.
Wow, 9 to 16% is already a massive hit to any budget.
It's huge, but it gets worse because it's so localized. In some of the high-cost counties, that number can just skyrocket to, well, almost 35% of the median household income.
35%. For you listening, just think about that. That's not a strain. That's asking a family to commit a third of their total earnings before housing, before food, just so the parents can go to work.
It's an immediate, enormous tax on the decision to even start a family. And that tax leads directly to measurable changes in behavior. This isn't just speculation that cost matters. We have causal evidence.
Right. And economists have a tool for this. It's called price elasticity.
Exactly.
So let's unpack that. Price elasticity is basically saying, if the price of something goes up by a little bit, how much does the demand for it drop? In this case, the demand for having a child.
You've got it. And the connection is surprisingly strong. The data shows that a 10% increase in the price of childcare for kids aged 0 to 2. It leads to a 5.7% decrease in the birth rate for women aged 20 to 44.
That's not a small number.
Not at all. That 5.7% drop, if you convert it into raw numbers, you're looking at about 4 fewer births per 1,000 women, just because the price of care went up by 10%.
That's incredibly powerful evidence. It confirms that these reproductive choices are, at their core, economic decisions. But what I find even more fascinating is how this pressure messes with the timing. It's not just people saying no, right?
Absolutely not. The response is layered. When childcare prices go up, we see mothers immediately delay their first birth. For that same 10% price hike, it's a delay of roughly 4 months.
4 months.
And crucially, they also increase the time between their first and second birth by about half a month. Families aren't just opting out. They're actively pushing the decision down the road, hoping things get cheaper.
Which they rarely do.
Almost never. They are planning their lives around this huge financial barrier.
And this is where the data gets really, really interesting for me. It's almost counterintuitive. You'd think the person feeling this the most would be the young parent, just starting out, with less money.
Right, the most financially constrained.
But the research shows it's actually older women, we're talking 30 and above, who are more sensitive to these price hikes than younger women. Why is that? Why is the 30-plus group feeling this so much more intensely?
That higher sensitivity is, I think, the clearest sign of how economic structure dictates family choices. And it all comes down to one thing: opportunity cost.
Okay, lay that out for us.
Well, think of it like this. The older a woman is, the more time she's spent building her career, right? Accumulating work experience.
Her human capital, basically.
Exactly. And that translates directly into a higher wage. So her time, just her raw time on the market, is more valuable. So when she thinks about pausing her career or doing the childcare herself, her opportunity cost, the income she gives up, is way, way higher than a younger woman's.
So because her time is so valuable, she's pushed to stay in the workforce.
Heavily incentivized, which means she's pushed to outsource her childcare completely to professionals. And that makes her totally reliant on the formal care market.
Which makes her exquisitely sensitive to any price changes in that market.
That's the perfect word for it. She's exquisitely exposed. So the irony is, having a higher income doesn't free you from the crisis. It actually gives you greater exposure to the full, non-negotiable cost of care.
And there's data to back that up.
Oh yeah, clear data. Women with an undergraduate degree, which we use as a proxy for higher lifetime earnings, they show way more price sensitivity. We also see that the peak spending on formal, expensive childcare happens when parents are in their 30s.
Right, when their careers are taking off and their salaries are highest.
Exactly. They're paying the highest possible price to maintain that career.
Which brings us to the multi-child problem. It's not just the first kid that's expensive. The collapse in fertility is really compounded because the decision to have a second or third child is even more affected by price.
It is. The marginal cost is just prohibitive.
Why is that?
Because the cost structure is additive. It's not like you get a discount. If you're already paying, say, 15% of your income for one child, the idea of paying 30% for two or more, it just becomes financially catastrophic.
So the person most likely to want another child, an existing mother, is also the one who knows exactly how much it costs.
She has the clearest picture of the unbearable financial burden. She does the math and realizes it's just not possible.
This whole cost structure just highlights a massive systemic gap in the U.S., especially when you look at other industrialized nations.
The comparison is stark. As we said, the U.S. childcare market is basically a private capitalist framework. The country spends just 0.33% of its GDP on public early care for kids aged 0 to 5.
0.33%. How does that compare?
It's less than half the OECD average, which is 0.74%. And it is a tiny, tiny fraction of what countries like France spend. They're well over 1.3%.
So the burden of, well, human production is placed almost entirely on individual parents.
Exactly. It's on the parents, not the collective society, that at the end of the day reaps all the benefits of a future workforce and tax base.
And this idea, this tension between individual responsibility and collective investment is so critical. To really understand these interlocking pressures, the financial, the social, the professional, we kind of need a theoretical framework.
We do. The problem isn't just a market failure. It's a systemic failure to support the very people the system relies on. And to frame this, we could look to the Combahee River Collective.
The CRC, right. A Black feminist lesbian organization from the 70s in Boston.
Right, active from 1974 to 1980. They gave us this crucial theoretical lens.
They articulated a system where you just can't separate the economic from the social and the political.
Their key insight was the concept of interlocking systems of oppression. And while their focus was on race, gender, and sexuality, the framework is so vital for understanding this modern demographic crisis.
How so?
It highlights that you can't view these financial pressures, stagnant wages, housing costs, lack of social infrastructure, in a vacuum. They are intrinsically linked to the systemic expectations placed on women who are tasked with providing the next generation. The financial crisis is the social expectation being made impossible by the market.
So if we accept that this is a solvable cost crisis and not some kind of moral failing, we have to go back to the numbers. What does the data tell policymakers is the most effective way to actually fix this?
The cost-benefit analysis is surprisingly clear. Based on that price elasticity we talked about, you can model the impact of a subsidy. Subsidizing childcare by just 10% annually would cost the government about $2.13 billion.
Okay, $2.13 billion. What's the return?
Well, the data estimates that this subsidy could lead to about 205,000 additional births in the first year alone.
205,000. That is a massive return. But let's look at the the cost per unit. If you divide the cost by the births, what's the price tag to support a new family's decision?
When you break it down that way, the cost per additional birth comes out to roughly $10,400.
So that's the subsidy needed to shift the math enough for a family to go forward.
That's right.
So is $10,400 per birth a good deal for society?
In terms of long-term economic stability, absolutely.
Yeah.
Compared to the trillions you'd spend trying to support an aging population without a workforce, investing 10 grand to bring a future taxpayer into the economy is incredibly efficient. It shows that providing real financial support is the necessary path.
And it's not just about direct subsidies, is it? Things like regulations, they have these complex ripple effects on the market.
They do, and that's a delicate balance. For instance, when states loosen regulations like group sizes or staff-child ratios trying to lower costs, the market responds instantly. You see a drop in employment, fewer new hires in childcare.
Which could lower quality, but what happens to the pay for the workers who are left?
Their earnings tend to go up.
Yep.
It suggests the market is trying to stabilize itself, maybe rewarding more experienced staff. But it just shows how sensitive the whole system is. Any policy change on cost directly impacts labor and the quality of care that families, especially those higher-earning, price-sensitive families, rely on.
So, to summarize our deep dive for you, this whole birth rate crisis in the U.S. is fundamentally a cost crisis. It is not a crisis of desire. And it disproportionately hits families thinking about a second or third child. And maybe most surprisingly, it hits higher-earning women the hardest. Their success actually makes them more financially exposed to the insane cost of care.
The economic data really confirms the narrative that a lot of people try to ignore. If a system depends on human production on future workers, it has to invest in the means of that production. Without actively preventing rising costs and providing real financial support, birth rates are just going to continue their steep and very predictable decline.
This deep dive confirms that reproductive decisions are deeply, measurably economic decisions, and the price tag for family life in the U.S. is currently too high.